Brilliant. Fantastic. Hey, so I'm really excited to be here with you, Teju. And the reason that I really wanted to connect with you is because I love connection, but also because as we spoke the last time that we met, after dealing with some pretty massive challenges in my life a little while ago, I paused and zoomed out from everything and looked at what we're doing, looked at the things that are happening and around us in our society, Western society, and saw well, I had seen lots of the problems prior to this, but I became acutely aware of the scale of the challenges that we are experiencing in our Western world, and just realized that I had been participating in that, that the machine that was kind of facilitating a lot of the challenges. And so I was very aware, I'm a helper. I like to help people, and I like to help little things that need help, or I like to help anybody actually. It makes me feel really good, which is, I think, actually a very natural human kind of thing to do. But I seem to be more acutely aware, I seem to be very acutely aware of challenges in other people, and decided at this point, I was like, actually, I just want to spend more of my time helping. And so I kind of went on this journey of, exploration into why we have all these challenges. What are the problems that we have, and why are they here? Why do they exist in our society when we are the most, essentially the most privileged people on the planet? And we have, massive challenges with, poverty and homelessness. We've got depression and anxiety. We've got addiction and conflict. And, people are feeling insecure, socially, emotionally and economically, and it just doesn't seem quite right. So I'm kind of really interested in talking to people who have explored these sort of same kind of questions, and ask, look at how we can design ways of being together, new systems and new solutions that that might actually facilitate that all of our needs can be met, because I truly believe that they could be if we just rearrange things. So obviously we met last week at Katie's little gathering, and I feel, the people that I'm connecting with are amazing people that I'm meeting on my journey. And I head along to events and activities and meet people in the streets, and it's amazing what incredible things people are doing in all sorts of spaces, even just living their lives, and the insights that I've been getting from connecting with people and learning about who they are and where they've come from, have been delivering some really interesting insights. And your your work is fantastic, and I'm really interested in a few things which I'd love to explore with you today. Firstly, the article you wrote on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, was a particularly great interest to me, because meeting of needs, I believe, is the underpinning of our well-being as a humanity on the planet. And if we can facilitate that, I believe that if we can facilitate that everybody's needs are met, then there would be much fewer of the problems we've got. So are you able to just sort of outline, the article that you wrote on the Blackfoot people and Maslow's exploration into the Blackfoot people, just to kind of build out, how that, how that went. Tell us about the article.
Sure. Well, first of all, Amy, I just resonate with everything you're saying. And I do think it's really natural that humans want to help and support one another. And so I appreciate, I'm with you in this inquiry that you're on. And the article basically is an investigation of Maslow's time with the Blackfoot people, the Siksika people, as they describe themselves, in Alberta, Canada. He spent 6 weeks with them, and he went to visit the Blackfoot as a 30-year-old aspiring academic who had this theory that all human societies are maintained somehow by a quest for dominance, that everyone's seeking power is kind of keeping us all in check, very similar to the Adam Smith concept of if everyone pursues their self-interest, then everything is taken care of, kind of thing. And so he wanted to, he saw that in the United States, and he felt like he had pretty good evidence that that was happening in the United States, and he wanted to go find out if that was true in other cultures. So he went to the Blackfoot, and he found none of that. In the Blackfoot culture, he found that instead of that quest for dominance, there was a high level of equality, very little aspiration for dominance, high levels of collaboration, full bellies, virtually no crime, virtually no, none of the inequalities or challenges that you would see in a place like the United States or in a lot of Western societies. And he described the Blackfoot as 80 to 90% having a quality that he would later term as self-actualization. And he felt that in the United States, only 5 to 10% of people had this same quality. And so he became very curious about what creates self-actualization. And he also observed among the Blackfoot very unusual behaviors. They have a giveaway ceremony, for example, every year, where everyone in the community will circle up their teepees, and they'll take all the possessions out of their teepee and put them in big piles in front of their teepee, so everyone has visibility into what everyone has. And the wealthiest members of the tribe will give every single last possession of theirs away to others who are needing more blankets or more food or etc. until they have nothing left. And those people are considered the wealthiest, the people who after that giveaway ceremony are left with nothing because they've done the most to support the community. He saw a very, very free way of child rearing where children were given total freedom to do almost whatever they wanted. And at the same time, they were very respectful, very community oriented, and they were given rights to votes and the ability to participate in community decisions and discussions. He saw, you know, the way that the Blackfoot treated those who made mistakes or committed crimes, as basically saying, look, if you leave behind this behavior, all will be forgiven and forgotten, and you can re-engage in our community the same way as before without any record following you around or anything like that. And there were no prisons, there weren't locks on the doors. It was just a very different culture and society than the kind that Maslow was familiar with in his own native United States. So after that experience, he went on a journey to understand self-actualization and how we actually get there. And he wound up studying high-performing folks in Western culture like Albert Einstein, Marie Curie, and the top 1% of college students at Western institutions, and basically from that work and other research and his own experiments came up with the hierarchy of needs. But his conclusions about the hierarchy of needs stand in contrast, I think, to the Blackfoot way of life, which, though they didn't have the word self-actualization, they viewed us as, so Maslow's hierarchy says that you have to first have food, shelter, water, then you need to have security, then you can have love and belonging, then you can have self-esteem, and then you experience self-actualization, which Maslow defined as being all that one can be. He later added self-transcendence to the top of his hierarchy. And so those are the sort of levels that Maslow described. To the Blackfoot, we are all born into the world as a spark of divinity, imbued with particular gifts. And as soon as we come on into the earth, the job of the tribe is to take care of us, keep us safe, keep us fed, meet our basic needs, and support the expression of that spark of divinity within us, our purpose within us that serves the community. And so as people start doing that, there's a desire to pass on what they have learned to future generations as well, to keep supporting that cycle. And so they see self-actualization almost as the starting point for civilization, rather than Maslow, who saw it as an individual achievement. And for the Blackfoot, the collective expression of purpose in every person was the goal and what they designed their civilization around. And so that's a little bit about that article.
That's Amazing, and I got goosebumps at several points, particularly the part where you said they put all their stuff out on the out the front of their teepees, and they let everybody um, meet their own needs, like take what they need. And I think, we're seeing a little bit of this kind of way of thinking coming into our lives with these, street libraries and, kitchen cupboards on the sides of the roads for people to take what you need and leave what you can, which is beautiful. But what I'm really interested in is, what are the key pieces of the way that, obviously the Blackfoot people didn't design their culture. And I feel like that's something that we do in Western culture quite a lot, is we design things to fix problems. But it seems like on our quest to design new things to fix problems, we often create new ones. I mean, the environmental degradation that we've seen over the past 100 years has, been, firsthand a result, contributed massively by what we've designed and the way we've designed to be and to, create more things. So what are the things in, like, if you were to say, what is the design of the culture of the Blackfoot people, what are the key pieces that we could take out in order to think about how we're designing, if we were, because that's what we like to do in Western culture, is create new things. Was there some things?
Well, I mean, I'm no expert on Blackfoot culture. I really, my only exposure is in the form of this article that I wrote.
Sorry, of course, yes. I guess from the research that you did, and I think this really speaks to, and we see it in lots of Indigenous cultures, is, what are the things that they are doing that look after them so well. And I think that the interesting thing is that and I want to say the lack of resources actually facilitates a greater awareness. I mean, it's possibly also this belief of connection to place and to connection to each other. This nobody's okay if everybody's not okay. That kind of feeling is something that I've certainly seen and experienced. And when I've seen communities doing well, they are thinking outside of themselves often, and I think our culture really, it's kind of like we're so busy trying to get ahead that we don't realize that we're leaving everybody else behind. And yeah, so were there any sort of key pieces that you thought were really poignant?
Well,
like, what is it that makes good community where everybody's needs can be met? What are those things? I mean, obviously, you hear Maslow saw that there was no crime, that there was, a very different way of childbearing, and these things all obviously they're either a result of the way that the culture is, or they underpin the way that the culture is, and the fact that there is low crime, the fact that the children have the freedom to explore, maybe that means that they do feel more self-actual, they stay connected to their themselves, and they are less inclined to commit crime. And I think, in our society, it's difficult to know whether the appearance of the lack of our needs is driving the things that are problematic for us, or the things that are problematic for us are driving, that we say mental illness causes crime, addiction, so forth and so on. But what if the insecurity that we're feeling, and certainly this is my experience from being in the veterinary industry, that industry has a very high suicide rate, which is it a result of poor mental health? I don't think that most people that go to vet school have poor mental health, but they often end up with poor mental health as a result of being in that industry. So there's something about that for me that is not quite right, especially when suicide is the a very prominent feature in that industry. So like, what can we do? How can we think about being together in a way that that will facilitate greater well-being and the meeting of our needs, so that we can be okay, be better together, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. I think that we know how to be with one another. It's not a mysterious thing. I think we practice this a lot of the time already. For example, how do we raise our children? How do we love our partners or our friends? It's not to say we can't deepen or grow in those areas, but I think there is a knowledge we all have about how to take care of one another. And so it's not rocket science. It's not rocket science. I think that the Western culture is mired in individualism and a belief that, my life is up to me and my needs are mine to take care of. Your needs are yours to take care of. But I think this way of life comes from a woundedness. And here's what I mean by that. Let's say that you're in a community and all of a sudden that community stops taking care of you. Maybe you've done something wrong. Maybe they are scapegoating you. Maybe any number of things could happen. But for some reason, the community is not going to take care of you anymore. In a situation, let's say like back in our ancient times as humans, where the community was your source of safety. Predators don't attack large groups of humans normally, but they will attack an individual human wandering the forest, finding water, growing food. These things are very difficult as an individual human. And so to be cut off from community is maybe a death sentence for you. So if your community is not allowing you to participate in the community, or it's not even taking care of you fully as well as it could be, if you don't trust your community to take care of you, what options do you have? And I think that one option you have, if you can manage it, is to make your community take care of you. How do you make your community take care of you? To do that, you have to gain some kind of special advantage. Maybe it's strength, maybe it's access to a resource, something like that. And maybe it's secret knowledge of a local source of water that no one else knows about, something like that, right? And if you have that access, then you have to cleverly divide people in the community and roll them in some sort of system that you're creating where your needs are the fundamental goal of the system. So for example, you have this river, someone comes along from your tribe and you're like, hey, if you want to drink from this river, like you gotta ask me first. And if you don't, I'll kill you, kind of thing. And if that person thinks that might actually be true, then they agree to your terms, and so your terms might be, all right, you have to help me keep this river safe and protect it from the next person. And, this is an example. It's a hypothetical, but yeah. Basically you use your power over, and through dividing people, you kind of create a system. And as that system progresses and more people come to participate in, the only way to do it is to create unequal access to the resource that you have. So that first person who comes along, maybe you give them more, frequent opportunities to connect to the river and to the water. And the third person who comes along, the two of you are uniting against them to co-opt them into the system. And then the three of you co-opt the next person, etc. Anyway, what I'm getting at is you have to build inequality. You have to create a system that keeps people divided and distrusting one another to ensure your power over them. If you don't do that, then people come together and they challenge your power. And then there goes your protection of meeting your needs. And so I think this is the way that we have built a lot of Western civilizations. It's focused on control, and that control is a response to not trusting the people around you, not trusting the environment around you to be caring toward you. So you pursue control, and when you pursue control, you hurt your chances of creating relationship. If you force someone to do something, you're damaging your chances for being in relationship with them.
And therefore
they don't trust you.
Yeah, trust is a big feature here. And I think it's really interesting. Yeah, I'd love to hear more of your thoughts about, how do you facilitate trust? Like, And, it's kind of like chicken and egg, isn't it? Which one comes first? And so what you're just saying is that if you're damaging relationship, then there's less trust, and therefore it perpetuates the power dynamic, or the need to do the right thing by the person who has the resource, because there's no relationship. So tell me what your thoughts are about trust. And
well, let me get to that, because I'm just finishing my thought here. But I think what's important too is you have to really preempt any attempt for people to come together and unite against you if you're in this position of power. So you start telling stories, for example, that make it harder for people to unite against you. I am the son of God, or I'm ruling by divine right, or you create a certain group of people who are untouchables, or whom if you interact with, you'll have bad luck, or you start to create these stories and these myths in the culture and the society. And this is played out in history. Like in American history, there was a time when people of any race could be enslaved, including white people, Black people, Native people, Asian people, Indian people were all slaves at a time in the United States. And there was an uprising called Bacon's Rebellion, led by a white slave named Nathaniel Bacon, who brought this multiracial coalition of enslaved people together to challenge the overseers. And the rebellion was narrowly put down because they were ratted out by one person in the coalition. So the oat plantation owners and the Commonwealth of Virginia found out, and they were able to quell this uprising. So after that happened, they did exactly what I'm talking about. They went to the white people and they said, you know what, you look like us. You look like us plantation owners. So we can free you from slavery. And in exchange, you can never talk to the other slaves again. We'll pay you 10 cents, but if we catch you associating with them, we'll kill your families and your children. We'll take everything you have. You'll go back to slavery, all this stuff. So they enrolled the white indentured servants and enslaved people in their system of racial hierarchy. And now these people are actually defending that system because they don't want to go back to slavery. And in the same way, they made a decision not to pursue Native and make Native American slaves, because that would invite attack from the tribes. They made sure to focus only on slaves from Africa, enslaved people from Africa, and they tried to create a system that would enslave people in different parts of the continent who spoke different languages, so they couldn't come together and couldn't speak. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is how power works. And this is a system that we've seen in a lot of Western culture that's based on distrust. So now your question is about trust. How do we build trust? So for a lot of indigenous people, and actually this is really well summarized by the indigenous writer Tyson Yunkaporta, who wrote a beautiful book called Sand Talk about the Aboriginal people of Australia and a lot of their beliefs, and also indigenous people across the world. And he said one of the key differences between what he calls settler culture, the culture I'm talking about of distrust, or white culture or Western culture, and indigenous culture, is that indigenous people believe that they belong to the land, and settlers believe the land belongs to them. And so there's a different orientation to the world. And so for a lot of indigenous people, there was a trust that the earth was offering everything needed to have a good life. And obviously the civilization we have built does not trust that we can be taken care of by the earth. It's cold, harsh, dangerous, unforgiving, filled with predators, filled with disease, filled with all these things. So our job is to separate ourselves from it. And a lot of indigenous cultures were living in a relationship with the land where they saw themselves as stewards, able to support the growth of other living beings around them, and where they saw that as supporting them. And so there's a trusting relationship with that land that a lot of indigenous people, and I don't want to generalize because there's so much diversity among indigenous people, but in general are practicing. And that's very different exploration kind of mindset of settler culture at a lot of the time. So then when you build relationships, with other humans from this place of trust, it looks similar to, I think, the way the Blackfoot culture looks, where there is less hierarchy, there is more inclusiveness, where the job of the whole tribe is to ensure the well-being of every single person. That's not the job of the person in power who's trying to keep people from uniting in order to challenge their power. Their main job is to take care of their own well-being and to prevent any opportunities for people coming together. So the goal of this system is separation and division. The goal of this system is holistic well-being for the people who are part of it. And I think that's one of the big differences.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. Now, in my journey into, this exploration of how do we get here, and how did these things happen? That's an incredible story. I'm really interested in how each one of us came to be the humans we are today. And, I've got my story of how it is that I ended up on this kind of quest of exploration to try and understand things. I'm really interested in what made you the human you are today, and go on this journey. How have you come to this? I mean, you're doing some great work with Gatherfor, which we'll talk about shortly. But how did you come to explore, this particular Maslow's, relationship with the Blackfoot people, and what are your drivers, and where did they come from?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't know. Everything is, I think, as said in Buddhism, there are infinite causes and conditions that lead to anything taking place. So it's in many ways it's beyond me, but I can attempt a story that, make some sense. But I think, some of the things that have marked my life are being the son of immigrants from India. They came here a few years before I was born, my parents. And, one thing about their story is that in some ways, came here, meaning the United States, that's where I live. And, the American dream narrative tells us that you can come to America and you can be whatever you want to be, have the life you want if you just work hard. And you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And so my parents showed up in the United States with $200 in their pocket, and they were trained as doctors in India, but that wasn't recognized by the United States. They had to retrain and all this stuff. They wound up, eventually building a good life and having me and my two sisters. So they lived the American dream. That's one version of the story. But what really is, I think, most striking is how they would not have succeeded if not for the support of community. So when they arrived here, my uncle said, come and stay with me. And they stayed with my uncle for over a year when I was just born and in my first year of life, without which it would have been very difficult to get by. While my dad was there, he met someone who he didn't know him, but was impressed by him and decided to make a call on his behalf, and helped him get a position as a resident at the University of Colorado, which is where I grew up in Colorado. So my dad and my family moved there, and we grew up there. And my dad had to moonlight, working at a factory as a DJ, doing all sorts of odd jobs, but also was able to buy a house for a $500 down payment through a government affordable housing program. They had a place to live. And so without the support of my uncle or Stu Schneck, this kind stranger who made a call from my dad, or the government providing subsidized support, it would have been really difficult for my family when they first got here. And there are all these other instances of people helping. And so I think that I've always, had that awareness that, wow, the only thing that's enabled me to be in any kind of, in the situation I am in now is community, not my own individual efforts per se. I think the second thing is growing up as a person of color in a predominantly white environment was very shaped me as well. Is reminded or told or suggested to that I didn't belong because of my race. So when I was young, 5 years old, for example, I had some other kids tell me I couldn't play soccer with them because I was too dark to play. And the way I related to that was I didn't understand because it just doesn't seem relevant to me, or I didn't understand the connection, you know. But I had this thought of, well, you know, maybe if I were the best soccer player, it wouldn't matter. So then I had this strategy of like, oh, well, whatever I do, I should be the best, you know, because my belonging is fragile. So if I'm the best, though, it'll be strong, it'll be resilient, I'll belong, you know. And so I really was trying to achieve and win, be right, all this stuff. And it wasn't until about 11th grade when I had a lot of challenges in calculus class that I finally had to admit that I needed help from my classmates, many of whom were doing really well in calculus and who tutored me in a very non-judgmental and humble way to support me through that class. And it's after that that I really started to make friends and deep relationships. The admission of imperfection and vulnerability and meeting others was new for me, because I'd been trying to be this winner, best person ever, you know, kind of thing my whole life. And I think that was really an important phenomenon. And I think that, you know, I also realized that maybe many of us are carrying such a wound. Maybe many of us have experienced that we don't belong, or that there's conditionality to our belonging. And that's terrifying. It's as terrifying now as it was when we were back in that state of nature where exclusion meant maybe death. And so how do we deal with it? And I think a lot of us choose to deal with it. Similar to me, I wanted to be the best. That's kind of a quest for superiority, isn't it? It's a desire to prove that I'm better. And because I'm better, I belong. Because I'm better than at soccer, I should belong.
Yeah, the pursuit of achievement, because you are seeking belonging. This is so ironic, because you are seeking not belonging actually separates you out, because it creates a division of ability that means that people can't relate to you. And I think that's very prevalent in our society of, you know, that person's an expert, or that person, so therefore I can't connect with them because they know better than me, they do better than me, they have more than me. Or, you know, there's this division when we're actually looking, I think, you know, fundamentally to connect. But you've just described a personal example of exactly what you were just describing has happened with our society. And you know, and I think that really interesting to hear you say that the point with which you started to make friends and develop relationships was when you asked for help. And I mean, this is something that I've created a bunch of Facebook groups, or I started a Facebook group some time ago that was the premise of it was to be a safe place to ask for help from your neighbor, right? And that was that was some time ago. It was 5 years ago, and what happened as a result of it, and the absence of negativity and competition, because I was like, this is not about selling, this is not about advertising your business, this is about finding out what people need in our community and then seeing if the rest of us can solve those problems, can meet those needs. Is that people loved it. It felt really good. It was really positive. People are engaging. People were just giving people the stuff that they needed. They were just meeting each other's needs. And of course, the interesting thing about this is that in community, we have such great diversity of resources, you know, and we're so lucky. We actually have everything. We just don't know where it lives. So when we need something, we don't know who to ask. So being able to facilitate that there is an opportunity for people to come together and you know, find out what the other people need, so I can look around my house and go, oh yeah, I've got one of those, I can give you that. Or actually, I know how to do that, I can share that information with you. Or I've had that problem before. And so, you know, skills, resources, knowledge, experience, and also just human connection is all of that lives in the other people around us, especially in our society, because we have such great diversity and we're so abundant in our communities. So, you know, I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts about that experience, because I feel like there are some barriers to people asking for help. And I think you've just described one of them, which is, you know, I need to be seen to be a particular thing in order to, you know, be successful, in order for people to like me or whatever. And I mean, let's not even go down that rabbit hole. But, you know, the asking for help, you know, piece is key, and I'd really love to see it be more accessible to us, and I'd love to just undo all those barriers, and obviously it's a big set of barriers to undo. But yeah, tell me about that experience and your thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think that it takes healing. If we're carrying these wounds that result in us fearing that our belonging is conditional, or is very, if only if we fit into a narrow box can we belong, then we'll try to fit in that narrow box. And sometimes the people who feel like they really have to fit in that narrow box are some of the most privileged among us. Of course, in my case, I'm a person in a white community. I also have many privileges, and I have male privilege, for example. And I think for a time, I really worried that, am I being enough of a man? Am I expressing who I am in a masculine enough way? For example, am I fitting that, like, is my voice too high, or do I have, am I strong physically as a man? Like, there are these images that we all have to live up to, and apparently, and if we don't, then there's this insufficiency, and then you feel like you have to pursue that. And I think it's only recently that I've been able to realize, and I have to really thank many trans activists, for example, or because they have questioned the concept of masculinity and femininity. They have questioned the necessity of a gender binary, and I think that's actually liberating for all of us. That so much of the pressure that we feel to be a certain way comes from having to live out those scripts and those narratives, but sometimes it takes people who don't fit at all to ask the questions that free us all, and so in another realm of life, people who have physical disabilities have often been really unadvocated for by others. They have to do a lot of advocacy for their own well-being by themselves. Here in the United States, the laws that have been passed that have resulted in us changing sidewalks, for example, so they have what's called the curbed cut sidewalk, where a wheelchair can come onto the sidewalk because there's a ramp instead of that big curb that's difficult to get up if you're in a wheelchair, for example. Who benefits from that? Is it only people who are in wheelchairs? It's also mothers pushing their kids in strollers. It's also people with grocery carts full of foods. It's also business travelers who are pulling along their luggage. It's all these people who are wind up benefiting. And so much of this liberation, I think, is actually coming from some of the most marginalized people who are saying the way that we're building things is not working. And so by letting them lead us, they're actually helping us see a more inclusive world that liberates all of us. And I think that's really important. And so I think that honestly, what we need is spaces of healing and the imagination that often comes from people who are living at the margins of our society, who can offer us different concepts. We're talking about the Blackfoot and Maslow. The Blackfoot have been erased from a lot of their contribution, for example, to psychology and to Maslow is not well known or well documented. They're still a culture that's living and flourishing and practicing these things, but they're considered outside of, Canada and the United States, the places where they are and the lands that they're living. And so why is their story not told? Why do we not know that they're living in this way and that we could all learn from that? Why aren't we trying to learn from that? And I think that's some of the work that we really need to do, is learn more from people of color, from Indigenous people, from queer people, from trans people, from people who don't fit the mold of what is successful in society.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Sorry, just clear my throat. So much great stuff, and my brain's kind of going a little bit squiff around, where do we go with this? Because, the embracing of, I think two things in there, and I think that lots of people who, this is a really interesting thing, you talk about being wounded, because I think lots of people don't think that they've been wounded. They're just, but they're struggling and they don't know why. And I think that's a really interesting thing in itself, for us to realize. And I think this happened for me when I sort of zoomed out and I realized that I was like, I had been participating in a way that I thought was the right way to do things, because I was lucky and I had these opportunities to go to vet school, and I had a good brain, and so I should use it well. And so it was kind of like it wasn't that I was wounded, but there was definitely a story in my upbringing that led me to those things that took me down that route. And I'm not saying that was the wrong route to go down, but what I realized is I was doing things that weren't really aligned with who I was. So I was separated out from who I was, and I didn't really know what was, I didn't think that what was important to me were the things that I should be bringing into the world, probably because most of them are not economically rewarded, which is interesting in itself, that construct. I remember when I finished being a vet and I saw this guy at the gym, and I said, "Oh, Ross, I've stopped being a vet." And he said, "Well, what are you going to do now?" And I said, "I just want to make people happy." And he said, "Well, where are you going to get a job doing that?" And he's right. There is no job doing that. And it underpins, it was like, oh yeah, I need to get a job that does the things that I want to do. And when people go looking for those things, often there aren't jobs. And because that's our construct, or what we set our sights on, or what we've been told to do, we pursue those things. And I think that the interesting thing is, if we, I would love it for our pursuit to be about how do we help each other get our needs met. Like, if that was the goal, if the goal was for me to connect with you and go, hey, these are my needs, can you help me meet them? And you tell me what your needs are and I'll help you meet them. And then together we'll go on this little journey of exploration into how do we get our needs met. We'll do better than if either of us is doing it by ourselves. Then I feel like that would be a great journey, and it would develop relationship and for trust and connection. And we'd both have a different set of needs, so we'd probably be able to meet some of them for each other and then go searching for the others. Like, I feel like that would be a better game to be playing than the one that we're playing. And I do feel like it's a bit of a game. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you. I think that we are disincentivized, and there's a design to the system. I think our system is working as it's designed to work, and our system is not designed to take care of each other. Our system is designed to, I think, help people who are currently wealthy, continue to be wealthy and become more wealthy, and to prevent other people from coming together. If we keep people so caught up in struggling to meet their basic needs, then they don't have the time to ask questions. They don't have the time to organize grand collaborations. It's hard to go to a protest when you're struggling to make ends meet. It's hard to call your congressperson when you've got to work 2 jobs to feed your kids. It's really genius. It's really diabolical, the economic system that we live in, because it precisely becomes a tremendous obstacle to doing what you're talking about.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. Hey, so, let me launch right into Gather For. So I'd love you to share with us a little bit more about what you've created, how you came to come up with, the concept of Gather For and how it's designed and what it's doing, probably more to the point, because when I heard about it, I was like, oh, this is beautiful. It's not only facilitating that the needs of the people are being met, but that they're building relationships and they're helping each other to elevate themselves from a place of disadvantage when they probably didn't think that they could. Anyways, you tell us about it, because it sounds amazing.
Sure. So we are organizing teams of neighbors in small groups of 5 to 8 to support each other like families would. And so these teams of 5 to 8 come together and they have weekly meetings right now on Zoom during the pandemic. And they get to hear each other's stories. They talk about where they are in their lives, where they want to be. They learn about each other's dreams, and they learn to support each other. And that support might take a lot of forms. It might just be a safe space to talk. It might be a place to talk about difficult things like, how do I parent my kids in this pandemic when they're stuck at home? How do I think about their safety when they're going to school right now, when they're not vaccinated, all that stuff. It's also a space to, where one neighbor might step in and say, hey, you're working tomorrow and you don't have the time to call your kids' school and arrange the busing for them. I will call your kids' school and make sure that your kids are on that bus. Or it's a space where a survivor of domestic violence is building a relationship with men after a long time who are on her team, and feeling like she has a little bit more safety and a little bit more trust in that after going through her own struggle and hurt with that. It's a space where neighbors are offering each other food or pooling their money to help each other pay bills, or all of these kinds of things. It's even a space where people have talked about suicidal thoughts and been met with love and support from their neighbor team, and found themselves feeling like they're loved and they belong when they really did not believe that previously. So that's what these neighbor teams are. And then we try to resource these teams by providing direct cash assistance. So every neighbor that's part of our program so far, we've given $2,700 to. And we also, and there's 43 right now, we're in a pilot phase, we're very young here. And we also organize workshops and trainings about things like housing, or starting your own business, or your legal rights, or any of those kinds of things that the neighbors that we work with are seeking information or learning opportunities about. We have game nights, we have town halls, to bring the whole community together. As one team maybe works on how do we get everyone on our team childcare, and another team works on how do we find remote work opportunities in this pandemic, they get to come together and share what they've discovered with one another. And so the inquiry is really about, is it true that community actually has everything that it needs to ensure the well-being of each person within it? And I think what we're discovering is, yes, that the resources are there, the human support is there, just like you were talking about, Amy. And the issue is overcoming these boundaries, these barriers that have been placed. There's this beautiful quotation from Rumi who says, your task is not merely to seek love. Your task is to seek and find all the obstacles you have placed in your heart against it. And I think that's what we're doing is, people know how to take care of each other. People want to help each other, but
Absolutely.
These barriers, this distrust has been placed, this inability, as you said, to ask for help has been sewn into our psychology by our culture. And so this is a space that's trying to liberate us from those barriers so we can do what we do naturally, which is help each other.
So how do you do that? That's the interesting thing is, like, what are the barriers you've found? How do you facilitate the finding, the bringing together, and that overcoming of trust? Are you using, tell me about that.
Well, how do we do that? I think the biggest thing is you again, it's not rocket science. I mean, what we have done is we put up flyers, in food pantries and public housing buildings and in places like that. And we're working predominantly with folks who are food, job, housing insecure, some who are undocumented immigrants, some who are survivors of domestic violence, single parents, that kind of thing, some who are facing homelessness or living in homeless shelters.
People with major challenges.
And we invite them to be part of this, basically saying, hey, look, this is a tough time on everyone during the pandemic, and a lot of us are facing it alone, but we don't have to. And this is a space where we can help each other, and we are still learning how to do this, but you can join us and help us create what it looks like. And people have accepted that invitation. And at first it took us a couple of weeks, but we were able to recruit like 10 participants, and they told their friends and they told their friends, and through word of mouth, people found out about it and have joined. And we are now at 43 people, and there's a lot more interest in it and growing, and we're starting small and trying to keep it, really make sure we understand how to do this and what conditions support this community really coming together in the spirit of belonging. But it can really understand that with some depth, then yeah, we would love to grow it and do it in more places, or do it with more people in the community that we're working in already. So yeah, that's how we've been doing it. I think it starts with an invitation, and there are some people who are going to take you up on that. And once a few people do, then you've got a little bit of trust. You've got a little bit of, other folks who can help invite more people, and then it kind of grows from there.
Start with an invitation. It's fantastic. It's exactly what I was about to say. As I hear an invitation, like, hey, and also almost like an invitation for people to contribute to something that is growing, and like you're giving them an opportunity to participate in the creation of something, which is I believe another driver of of humans is, I think it's the reason that we evolved, isn't it? Because we're curious and we want to actually help and change and make things better. It's kind of like a human drive. Why we keep on turning over the next rock to see what else is under there. We want to explore, but we want to contribute. We want to feel good about who we are, and especially when we're not feeling good, there's an opportunity to do that. And I don't know, have you found, I'm assuming that you found that that when people can contribute, they feel good, and so they're positively reinforced. So it's this whole cycle of generosity that you can create by facilitating that people can give and contribute. They go, now I feel good, I'll do more of it. And then because I'm having such a lovely time, then I'll tell my friends. So yeah, it sounds fantastic. And so you say you've got 43 people involved, or there's more than that? There's 43 groups?
42 people in 7 groups. Mm-hmm.
In 7 weeks?
Yeah. 7 groups, seven groups,
seven
teams, 7 neighbor teams.
7 teams.
Yeah.
And you'll be learning a lot along the way. Fantastic. That's awesome. And in terms of resourcing, how have you accessed resources to do what you're doing?
We've fundraised some money. We've received it from a few foundations, but also from a grassroots fundraising campaign. We just raised $86,000 from an average contribution of $300 from about 150 people, and that we're distributing to our neighbors $2,000 each. Before that, we gave them $500 that we had fundraised each, and then also a $200 gift card that they could use at grocery stores or on Amazon or in a couple other places. They could even convert it to cash or a debit card and use it that way. And so, yeah, a total of $2,700 for each of these 43 neighbors. And that's giving us an opportunity to witness, what happens for folks when they receive that kind of resourcing alongside a really strong community of support. And at this small scale that we are operating now, if that really does have an impact, then can it be done elsewhere? And I think what we'd really like to do, Amy, is have this be resourced by communities and not by foundations or very wealthy people. I think some of the most important movements in history have been resourced that way, like the civil rights movement in the United States was not funded by foundations and high net worth individuals. It was funded by people of color chipping in $5 here, $10 here en masse, and that sustaining this history changing activity that led to the Civil Rights Act being passed in the United States, both Civil Rights Acts in 64 and 68. And similar thing with Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers movement, that was also sustained by the same farm workers who were advocating for higher wages and fair treatment in farms in the United States. That was funded by everyday people who were part of that movement. And so I think what we're after is, that again, this idea that community has everything that it needs to ensure the well-being of the people within it. And so what we're looking at doing is opening up Gather to diverse participants across incomes, across classes, across races, across all sorts of areas of diversity, because then we would invite people to each chip in a percent of their monthly income. And so we're thinking like 5%. And so for some of our neighbors who are lower income, they could put in 5% of their monthly income, which might be a zero, it might be $5, it might be $50. And for some of the wealthier folks that we would like to enroll and gather for, who also want to have conversations about how do we parent in this pandemic, and what do we do for the safety of our children who are unvaccinated in this time of COVID, or I'm dealing with mental health challenges, or what is my purpose and how do I fulfill it? Being in community and being able to have these conversations is equally rich and meaningful for wealthy people as well, for any human. And so, having teams of neighbors who are also wealthier, who can chip in their incomes, which maybe they're putting in $500, $1,000, $5,000 into a community pot that gets even redistributed across everyone else, meaning maybe folks can each get $1,000 a month or so. And so we've been working out the math on that, and if we can get enough participants, actually that kind of model could really work. And so the idea would be a neighborhood can provide the funding to sustain the folks who are low income, kind of like the Blackfoot, we're giving away in order to sustain. But that's actually important, because when these people are well, they're in a position to care for these people as well. And so some of our neighbors right now are taking the funds they're receiving and they're starting childcare centers in neighborhoods where there isn't childcare. So the wealthier folks in that community who have to drive, 20, 30 minutes to drop their kids off at a daycare center now have an option, a 5-minute walk out their door, because they helped provide funding to people who
had the time and
now
space
can offer their kids childcare, right? Well, not the time and space, but we're starting a childcare business, and that's like the work that they want to do in their community. And so that's I think that's kind of what we're hoping to see, is that the resourcing of this work is actually coming from within the community. We haven't proven that. That's the inquiry that we're on. But if we find out that can work, it would give us a lot of encouragement to be able to offer what we've learned to other communities who could then self-deploy and self-resource this work themselves.
Yeah, and I guess that would be offering them an empower, if you have a model that you can hand to other communities and then they take responsibility for it, then you've got a winner, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, and that communities can modify it for their own context and because every community is different, has different cultures, different, conditions. And so, yeah, I think that would be the hope, is this work is really led by community for community.
Amazing. Now, we've been here for an hour and we've talked about some amazing things, and I'm very grateful to have you, to make some time to chat with me. What is the time where you are?
It's 3 p.m. in the afternoon.
3 p.m. in the afternoon. Fantastic. 7 a.m. here in Melbourne. And obviously this is going to be a podcast, and it's been interesting listening to the audio, and there's been a bit of a delay, and there's been a few glitches on my internet, and this is I'm learning, and I'm aware of my anxiety around getting things right and wanting to be right and stuff, but also really wanting to share this stuff that we're learning, because the interesting thing is that what you have you just wanted to join the room, Upcycled Food Association, entered the waiting room? Is that you?
Oh, that's my next call. Mm-hmm.
Oh, right. Oh, goodness. Sorry, I should go. Anyway, let's continue the conversation. Can you tell me, how do you say your last name?
Yes, it's Ravi Lochin. And
Ravi Lochin.
Yeah, actually, before we part ways, Amy, do you mind just making me the co-host so I can admit Turner in for the meeting?
Of course, I'm the host. I was like,
that's right. I made you the host.
There you go. And I do that. How do I do that?
If you click on, if you hover over my picture.
I'm going to make co-host. Yes.
Okay.
Anyway,
perfect.
This has been amazing. I'd love to hear those connections and how you're measuring the success, and all that sort of stuff at some stage. But this has been amazing. Love that we've made a connection, and we can start sharing, because the way you've designed Gather For and the way I designed Good Karma Effect is it's the same. It's like, how do we figure out how to get everybody's needs met and invite everybody to the party? So we're very aligned, and it's been awesome to talk with you again. Let's stay in touch and hear how we're going, shall we?
That sounds great. That sounds great, Amy. Lovely to speak with you, and look forward to being in touch for sure.
Sounds great. Thanks. And it's Teju Ravilochan. Say again. Say your last name.
Ravilochan.
Ravilochan. Fantastic.
Ravilochan.
Ravilochan. Right. Thank you. Is that right?
Yes.
Ravilochan?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Take care.
Thanks
yeah,
a lot.
you got it. You got it.
All right. See ya. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.